our purpose and goal of being here is to prepare us for those opportunities that are there, especially in leadership, in many capacities, in which God, because I believe that our lives more so are ordained by God. It is not by chance that we are here this morning, because in this crowd I know we are going to raise great women. I am here to take us through international relations. So we are going to have a very interactive session, as said, and therefore as we begin, yes, international relations. So when we talk of international relations, what comes to your mind? What comes to your mind?
When I hear the term international relations, I see three terms: inter, national, and relations.
Yes.
So the term inter means that there must be some parties who are doing something together, something that benefits both of them mutually. So for me, international relations is the relationship or the interaction of more than one country in a form of an exchange, so that each one of them benefits the other mutually. Thank you.
Thank you, Frida. So she has said it is the interaction, the inter. Yeah, so it means that there is that interaction that exists. And according to her, she has said that this interaction is between states, yes, that are interacting. Yes. Let us move on. Somebody else.
A collaboration between nations to solve global issues. There are some issues which cannot be solved by individual countries because they cut across the borders. One of them is climate change, and it can also be the issue with the groups which are terrorizing the world. So countries need collaboration in order to end such kind of things. Thank you.
She has pointed out that that this collaboration does not just happen, but it comes for a purpose. And this purpose is to enable the states who are the actors here be able to address challenges that come about. So then with that, I guess we have a few of the items that we need to understand this space that is international. Yes, that we will be interacting in a space that is at the highest level of interactions. So I want us to imagine ourselves. So we have these levels of interaction which begins with me and you, yes? So that is our first level. So when we move from our first level, we move to what level? Other than between two individuals. What is the next level of interaction? Yes, so we move to community. Yes, so from the community level. Yes, so we have another space that is national, because communities come together to make up a nation. Yes, then from the nation states, we go to the region, our region here, which is in the Horn of Africa region. It is also within the East Africa, Africa, Sub-Sahara, all those, you know. So there are all those levels of interaction that we move beyond to the international context. And therefore, in this space that is international, we find that we have the various actors that are interacting in that space that is international. And therefore, a good definition of international relations would therefore not encompass just states, because, you know, we are living in a world where we have said there are all these levels of interaction. We are even interacting individually. Yeah? We are interacting within the region. We are interacting within the state. So we have all those many actors that are there, and therefore a good definition would be able to encompass, would be broad-based to bring in all the other actors of international relations. And therefore we can say that when it comes to international relations, it is one, a discipline where we sit, this is what we do, we teach international relations to our students to prepare them for international context. Then there is the practice, where we now engage in those matters at that highest level of interaction. And in that highest level of interaction, therefore, there are many actors of international relations. And this space is really very complex, because we are talking about, you know, an actor in international relations. Such that you have already identified in that definition states, there is international organizations. Yes, let us see who are these other actors that we have in this space.
I think political blocs, like when you look at the situation of Ukraine and Russia, and the fact that NATO is coming in as a political bloc to defend. So I think political, economic blocs. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Education actors. We have embassies and organizations that are sent to maybe Kenya to come and enable Kenyans to go and study in the US, in the UK, and the like. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want us to imagine, you know, an international space, you know, and we are talking about an actor of IR, of international relations. Yeah, is any entity, you know, think about any entity that can be able to influence matters at a global scale. You are felt, you know, that is where you are, that's the actor, that you have that capacity for you to be able to influence matters at the global scale. That is who an actor of IR is. So with that, I want us to add on to, yes, with that hint. Good, yes.
We also have the medical organizations, for example, the WHO and AMREF, that is in medical diplomacy, where we give masks to other countries.
Heads of state.
Heads of state.
Thinking about legal institutions like international courts.
Yes, they are still within organizations, structured. Okay.
Sports personalities and culture and entertainment.
Yes, let us keep going.
We have iconic personalities, for example, Wangari Maathai, that everyone can relate to.
So we are at a space where we have personalities, we have public figures that, you know, you don't struggle, you see them. Whether, as my sister here said, whether it is that businessman, you know, we are talking about those entrepreneurs in the world that are able to influence. Remember our COVID time? We were given assistance by some of these. Yes, who are these? Yes, Bill Gates, Jack Ma, then we were told the masks, I don't know, did it end up happening? When we think of international relations, therefore, you can start to see it is a space that is so crowded with any entity that can influence affairs is an actor of international relations. And therefore, I had a few definitions here that when we look at international relations, it can be defined as a relationship among world state governments, which has been captured. And you can see on that definition I have given it has come on its own, world state governments, and the connection of those relationships with other actors, which we have all that varied there, and other relationships which could be economic, cultural, domestic, you know, and we find that all these have a geographic and historical influences. So from our discussion, we have seen that at a case, if you can be able to influence matters globally, you will become an actor of international relations. You get to that position that you will not have an unfair advantage by rallying your community for the sake of getting a vote, but rather we shall preach peace from the highest peak of Mount Kenya to the valleys and to the wherever of this country. I want us to try and describe this interaction that is at that highest point and see what it looks like. So briefly, can we try to describe, to give away this space that is international. So we have seen the actors, and you have seen we have so many actors, anybody, any entity. So, when I ask you, just imagine yourself in an international space and you're interacting at that highest level. Yes, can you describe that space? How does it look like? So already, let me begin with the many actors that we have talked about. And therefore, you should know how to relate with terrorists. You should know how to relate with human rights groups. You should know how to relate with international organizations like the UN. You should know how, as a head of state, how am I going to present my country? You know, image is everything, you know. Yes, power is the currency of international relations. Tuna currency hapa, 500s. In international relations, the currency or they interact on the basis of power. Yes, power is what drives international relations. And therefore, my friend, this is where you find yourself as in those North-South debates. North-South debates are developing countries, debates where those who have the power do what they want, those that don't do what they must. That's a saying in international relations, that those that have the power do what they want, the others do what they must. Okay, so you don't want to get to a space where as a state you know you are losing, because when it comes to, though we are coming to that very fast, very soon, is that when we look at states and their vital interest is sovereignty and territorial integrity. Yes, that is the core, is at the core of its state, to defend its sovereignty and its territorial integrity. So then, when we look at most of this discussion we have had, we have said that international relations looks like a cobweb. You know, we have all seen easy cobwebs. It is, you cannot even tell which string is going where. But can you imagine the spider that spins this? Goodness me, you know. So that is international relations. It's that complicated. Then there is another school of thought which is realist. They say that international relations is compared to billiard balls, where there are these balls knocking against each other. And why they are knocking against each other is because states have interest. So we are colliding with Somalia and saying, you know what, this boundary here in the Indian Ocean is what? Is mine, horizontal, space, mine. Then they are saying, you know what, no, boundaries should be vertical to your what? To your line. And therefore, this, you know, is not right. And therefore, dispute, So why? Because there are interest there. And remember, territorial integrity and what? Sovereignty of the state. Not an inch more, not an inch less. That's your business as a head of state. You cannot give up your territory. How? How? Hey, yes. Emmanuel and Wallerstein theory is an economic model where he talks about the what? He talks about a model where we have developing countries, and therefore in terms of trade, so being a theory of informing development, he talks about the exploitation, that there is a lot of exploitation, the structure that exists in the world, the north-south, is that the developed exploit the developing. We have resources. Africa could be the richest, isn't it? We have all these resources, yet we are the poorest species on this world. Why? Why?
We are not allowed to make our own decisions, especially elective decisions. They are being influenced by outside forces. And mostly what I've seen in African countries, we keep on fighting each other. And while we are fighting each other, resources are being taken away. So there's also issues of corruption.
Yeah, so we look out for ourselves. What is my cut? Kick front, kick back, for all I care. Yeah, but I'm rich. Yes.
I think the reason why Africa is exploited all the time by the countries of the West is because of the vulnerability that came with being colonized, such that we are so helpless. We cannot do without their help. And even if we have the resources, we don't have the capacity to develop them. As the saying goes, he who feeds you controls you. So I think that that's our major issue. Aside from the fact that we have poor leadership, I think there's something bigger than that.
Okay, so then that's a good one, that we don't have the capacity to mine these resources. So then I have it there, but I cannot make good use of it. So, okay, come and exploit. Yes.
I think the West is using the divide and rule method. Yes.
What do you mean by divide and rule? Who is being divided?
Us, the Africans. We have lots of resources, but they will make us every time fight. They're the ones supplying us with the guns and everything, so that we fight, and then they exploit us.
Good points this morning. Yes.
I think the reason why Africa exploits its resources, it stems back from the times of colonialism. The colonizers, when they came to Kenya, for example, they realized that we have a lot of resources and we lacked knowledge of them. So what they do literally is they take our resources and we are the market. So they can't literally allow us to have the capacity to mine these resources or to have the technologies of mining them, because we are still even colonized in the mind. Because if for example we have the capacity to get the resources by ourselves, that means that they will have scarcity for their industries, and it goes without saying that therefore we as a market for the I'll say the European countries or the Western countries, it will go down. So we are a threat to the economy.
But I want to ask, when we look at the state and other actors, and when you look at the state, UN, international organizations, non-governmental organizations, terrorist groups, are they all at an equal space position? Or is the state a dominant actor, or is it the primary actor? So there are those that would argue, yes, the state is not necessarily, yes, it's a key actor, but it's not the most important actor. All actors in their own standing are important. Yeah, because when you look at the international governmental organizations like the UN, for instance, that does the global governance, that comes up with the norms and the values through its charter of the do's and the don'ts, and coming up with, the various organs that exist within the UN to be able to address the global challenges under its, ECOSOC, where we have all those agencies ranging from, let us first briefly maybe talk about this UN. So UN, an intergovernmental organization. So intergovernmental organization, and I'm going to use the case study of the UN, they are established by treaties, and therefore states do what? Yeah? Ratify. And that's the language. Yeah? You ratify, and there is a process of ratification. You do your first signature, you come back, you look at the the provisions of the charter, legal experts advice, and this therefore is where the legal experts are very key when it comes international to advise the state. Then from this international organization, we have the various organs. We have the General Assembly. Yes. UNGA, United Nations General Assembly. Yes, it meets once a year, every September, second Tuesday, straight 3 weeks, and therefore heads of states are brought together, and they sit one among equals, isn't it, in the plenary, where each is given an opportunity to address and give their, give their speech. Then from there, they produce what we call their decisions is resolutions, because they look at, prior to this, regions are given the opportunity to do what? To present what they would want to be the agenda. So there is the zoning that is done, the Europe, the Americas, the Latin America, Africa, Asia, and therefore their items must find at least their way into the agenda to be discussed. So once they discuss these issues from the regions, they make decisions and therefore resolutions. And who actualizes the resolution? The Secretary General with his what? Yeah, with his secretariat. So being the head of the secretariat is there to operationalize this and to make it work, and therefore be able to see to it that these resolutions are taking effect wherever, if it is an action that needs to be done by the UN. However, states by themselves, again, those that are essentially for states, they also take up. Then ECOSOC, the other organ, Economic and Social Council, has all these agencies that deal with all aspects of our lives. So the UN, therefore, as we see, is very busy organization, and states therefore apply to belong to the community of states. Yeah? You've heard of Somaliland? Yes. Yeah. But it's not sovereign. It's not sovereign. It's not recognized. It's not yet part of the community of states. Yeah, but that doesn't stop it from doing a lot of business with others around the world. So is Taiwan and other places. Okay, so we are in the role of the UN in international relations as an international organization. So its responsibility more is to ensure there is what? International peace and security. Yeah. So is there international, remember, not your country, yeah? But then the question is, you know, this line is also very blurred, because when we talk of what is domestic, what is international, you know, since the post-Cold War, and more so today because of the globalization phenomena, that line has really thinned. What is domestic, what is international? Yeah, because you can imagine COVID from Wuhan and the whole world is shut down. Yeah, that just goes to show the power of what? Globalization, isn't it? Yeah, and that issues to date that could be looked at as domestic could not necessarily be, because it has an impact on the region, on the sub-region, and, you know, because when a conflict is in, where? Kenya, 2007, yeah? Tunangoa rally. What happened to Museveni? No goods, isn't it? The pump prices were just impossible. You know, goods getting into his, they were not, and therefore, when you hear him saying, congratulating, and he's the first one to congratulate, hey, it doesn't mean that necessarily he's a friend. All he cares is that, hey, please, I want peace here so that I can move my goods. Because states have interests. All states have interest. That's very important in IR. And if all states have interest, your interest may not necessarily be Uganda's interest and may not be America's interest, because we are all at different. And you can start to see why the international relations itself is very complicated, because if all these states with all these interests, the more than 200 plus states of the world, all with their varied interests are interacting, there is possibility of collisions, isn't it? So all states want to be strong. That's the bottom line, eh? And therefore they want power. And that power is economic and military. Yes, that is how we measure power in IR. Economic and military. So you can start to see why we give so much in our defense ministry, because it has to be strong. It's the image out there of Kenya, isn't it? So anyway, it's a measure of power, it's a measure of might. Yeah. So then in maintaining international peace and security, for the UN, at times it's become so complicated. So getting into matters of instruments of both foreign policy and international relations. First, instruments of international relations. We have the 4 instruments. economic, military, information. Yeah, so you can start to see when we talk of diplomacy, what is diplomacy?
So diplomacy is simply negotiations between states. Yeah.
So I hear negotiations. So there is an aspect of, can we negotiate? So when we talk of negotiations, what do we mean? How do we negotiate? Yes. What is this to negotiate? Let us see.
Negotiation is basically having discussion between different states and then coming up with an agreement.
So there is an element of discussion, and when you discuss, there is the give and take. You know, you are there and you are not staying on your position. So when you come on the table, you come with your position, but the realities on the table are such that you all must move towards an agreement, you know, so that you can be able to have an agreeable position from which you can be able to operate. So states negotiate. What else in diplomacy? What do we do? Yes.
Diplomacy is the right opposite of military enforcement.
So the opposite. So what if I don't know military enforcement? Yes. What is military enforcement for it to be diplomacy? So in other words, you say that diplomacy is the conduct, therefore, of international relations without recourse to war. Yeah? So all that you would do without going to war would be diplomacy. But once you cross that path, it's no longer diplomacy. Diplomacy is the mainstay of international relations. This is how international relations is conducted, through diplomacy. You know, and therefore, this means that states must sit and negotiate. They must sit and agree to disagree. Yeah. Yes, not always you will agree. You will also agree to disagree, which is also okay. And therefore, when it comes to diplomacy, it's very procedural. Diplomacy comes with a whole package of preparation. Who negotiates is very important. Who will negotiate? And that, therefore, informs states, therefore, to establish a whole ministry that is responsible for linking the state externally to other actors. That anybody who wants to come to Kenya to invest must go through either our foreign office out there, because that is the space that is provided where they can go and negotiate on where they are coming to invest. Is it in Nairobi? Is it in Mombasa? In which sector are you coming to invest? And that is why a diplomat should be someone who understands the art of negotiation. So negotiation is an art. It's not something you wake up to nakaa kwa meza. No, it has to be, you know, planned for, and therefore you must have first met and discussed, anticipated positions of your opponent, so that when you sit there with China on the table, you are looking around, you sit around the table, and you are watching. And there is a lot of verbal, non-verbal, the power of the unspoken word. So diplomacy is the mainstay, is how we conduct international relations. And we are going to get into that discussion in a while. So allow me to move into the economic diplomacy. Economic instrument, before we get to economic diplomacy. Economic instrument.
So the economic instruments, this is the relations in regards to imports, exports, financial crises, and also financial institutions.
Okay, good. So when it comes to the economy of states, all states, remember, we say they have interest. So other than security interest, the other one is economic interest, because we are talking about development. You want people to have jobs, you want people to have a livelihood, you want people to have you want to develop your country, and this is where now as a government you must ensure that that development comes. So how then do you develop is done through that instrument, and therefore the foreign direct investments are very, very key. They are very important, and any mission abroad really should be working. So they draw their what? You know, when we work, we are told that there are certain, you know, expectations by the end of the year, isn't it? The key performance indicators. So there are some things, therefore, you must be able to meet. And this is where, as an embassy abroad and its staff of the embassy, they draw their working, you know, items from the foreign policy of Kenya, and more so must endeavor to make our economy strong by bringing in investors into this country. And therefore somebody said they want to be the next diplomat, the next ambassador to the US. Yes, we hope that they will be able to bring many investors into this country. But as you do that, remember the negotiation, because this is where the problem comes in. Yes, people negotiate, but the terms are very poor. You don't go into the small details. You are there with Chinese seated at the table. We are going to do your SGR. Very good, very good. We will fund. Very good, very good. We will even, give jobs to Kenyans. You're not going into the details of the jobs that who will be working. So when they come, they say, you know what? We cannot dare to leave this technology to Kenyans. Where when it's spanner boy, let a wheelbarrow skuma, full stop. This technology, it's guarded like yesterday. And this is what we are saying, that who negotiated? You didn't get into the details of, okay, so you are saying you will give Kenyans job. What is the detail of that job? You must go into the little most detail. So the question again begs, political and career diplomats, do they do equally a good job? So I think it's something that we can never exhaust that debate, because we've also had political appointees doing very well. And we have had career diplomats, again, not doing so well. So again, it's neither here nor there. But the most important thing is that there is the need, yes, as my sister has said, there is a need to promote and do what? And motivate hard work, isn't it? So that you're not working in MFA and for all your life you retire at 60 and you have never even headed a mission. Yeah, when somebody comes from high school the other day and 2 years down the line, because they are connected, they are already, holding flying positions within, it's not fair, Yeah, so it's good to promote good work and, of course, reward hard work. So when it comes to diplomacy, who is a diplomat? Who does the work of diplomacy? When it comes to diplomacy is the tool. Yeah? So we are talking about a tool of international relations. So just like we use various instruments, we want to imagine yourself having a toolbox. You are the president and you have a toolbox that you want to use, and you are wondering which instrument to pull at any given time. So diplomacy is that tool which you are supposed to always use when it comes to relating with others in the international relations. That's why we say it's the mainstay of international relations. However, it is not the only tool. Yeah, you have seen there in our previous image, we had the economic instrument, which means this is war, that states can go to war with each other in pursuant of your interests. And interestingly, really, international relations has a way of coloring and sanitizing it and moralizing it, making it acceptable. So you say we are only intervening. Yeah, we are intervening militarily. No, seriously. What are you doing? However, there is a difference here, because when it comes to military interventions, we find we have a civilian component. Yeah, this is where we find social workers, counselors, whoever, educationists, everybody, doctors accompanying these peacekeeping missions, as they are called, or are they peace enforcements today? Because at times there is no peace to keep. So you go for peace enforcement. And actually that is how peacekeeping today has revolutionized. It's really moving into enforcement, because at times there is no peace to keep. So you have to go there to force the peace to come. And that is why there is, of course, a whole spectrum of expanded mandate. When it comes to peacekeeping, the Blue Berets, these are the UN peacekeepers, no longer are standbyers, but they also are allowed to protect the mandate. They are allowed to shoot to protect themselves and to protect that which they have come to do. It's no longer the time when they were targets, yeah, of conflicts, belligerents, where in terms of the situations of conflict, they were now targeted, kidnapped, wherever, and even killed, because after all, they were just there to keep the peace. You have a gun, but you can't shoot. But now they have to protect themselves and to protect the mandate. Then the information instrument is the media. Media today has become a very important, not just the media, but information. That when it comes to information sharing, when it comes to diplomacy, we cannot have diplomacy without communication. Yeah, it's all about verbal and non-verbal, so that we are able to observe and we find that there is the power of the unspoken word. Yeah, you can greet without greeting, isn't it? Yes. Yeah, so I automatically I can read your mood, and that is why in this context where we are in the COVID, or is it post-COVID, there is the question of the impact of the COVID-19 on diplomacy, because diplomacy depends on communication and more of the non-verbal communication. And that is why, as you sit on the table, somebody asked about negotiations, you sit on a table and you're able to see everybody. You look this, you look that way, and you're able to see everybody and their reaction and know, that one I need to be very careful, calculative, choosing my words very carefully. So how can other ministries of government come on board? So this SGR project is a very good one for our example, that it is a ministry of what? Transport. It's a road issue. So it brings on board what? That particular ministry and other experts. So it brings in people of money matters. So when you're going negotiation, somebody from Treasury has to be there representing Kenya's interest on monies there. Somebody from the roads, somebody from the environment, because of the environmental impacts of the SGR, it's going to pass wherever, even through a national park. So what impacts is it going to have? Ministry of Foreign Affairs, because of linking us externally, trade, commerce, all these people. So that composition, you see now someone was asking about negotiation. Who negotiates? It has to be experts from those different departments, and they constitute what we call interministerial meetings, where you start now to prepare for the negotiations that are going to take place. So we have, therefore, the media becoming very powerful tool today in shaping opinions, in shaping the mindsets. And this is where somebody was saying we are colonized in the mind, because we watch this media and you think this is what everybody, and this is how everybody lives. That is the reality, that there is the power of the media in shaping our thinking and our minds, and states therefore have used that instrument as a very powerful tool to posture themselves around the world. So we define diplomacy that as any of those powerful methods of interacting without going to war. So it means we have some gray areas of diplomacy. Yeah, because if diplomacy is the sum total of all that a state does, other than negotiations, all that a state does without going to war would account to what diplomacy is, then you see there are some gray areas, because we are talking about some coercive diplomacy. We are talking about the use of hard power, sanctions. You have seen what has happened to Ukraine, to Russia today because of the issue in Ukraine. That individuals, because of being a friend or being regarded as an oligarch, very close to the presidency, that your assets abroad are targeted. So then that is the unfortunate thing, that when it comes to diplomacy is the sum total of even sanctions are there in. So there are many methods that we use when it comes to diplomacy. Among them, I have said there is an element of coercive diplomacy, where we have sanctions, blacklisting, embargoes, boycotts of products, isn't it? So that at the end of the day, a state is forced to change or comply by a certain action, like we have done in Ukraine, or as it is done in Ukraine today. And therefore, because this is a problem of the NATO powers and Putin, why can't we as a country, I mean, we are in this space where we are struggling, like now flour, pump prices are becoming impossible. Why can't we just say we are buying Putin, the oil user? After all, it's cheap. Why can't, I mean, what have we got to do with? What would be the repercussions of this? Yes.
We run the risk of, you know, falling out of, you know, good relations with other countries that don't support Russia, and namely NATO. Yet, if you look at NATO, a lot of those countries are actually countries that we depend on for funding as, you know, business interests and things like that. And I even remember, like, during the Russian war, like when it started, some of Kenya was actually reaching out to some of the countries, like in the NATO nations, to actually help to, like, you know, help our people to get out of Russia. So we might actually end up getting caught up in the diplomatic, you know, sparks between these countries. So because now we belong to these, you know, we have signed these, what are they called?
Yes.
The treaties and things like that. We can't just go and behave like we don't belong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good. So I can see the learning has taken place. Yes, that we have norms and values of international behavior, and therefore you have ratified and you belong to this, and this is the expected behavior of everybody that is in that space. Moving on, the question is then, why negotiate and who negotiates? So when we look at this, I guess these are familiar persons to us, and this is in the context of, in what context is this? The post-election violence. So it's an aspect of diplomacy of conflict management, where we have track one. What we call a track one is mainly done by governments and international organizations, and we all know that Kofi the late was brought here under the auspices of AU, but he had the whole world constituents supporters to him, because the UN was he's part of his constituent, and we understand how the mediation process went and how we felt the power of powers here. When Condoleezza Rice landed, way power, we felt it, isn't it? We couldn't make phone calls. It was all jammed and all that. Okay, so what kind of a diplomacy is this? Yes, UNGA. So this is United Nations General Assembly. So what is this type of diplomacy? Anyone with an idea? So it represents multilateral diplomacy, where these interactions take place between more than one actor that are brought on board, where state actors are more than one, and therefore they come together either within a smaller region or within their overarching body, like the UN. So it's multilateral diplomacy, and it takes place in that context. This kind of a diplomacy, it's bilateral, and we can see which states here? China and Kenya, and we can see these negotiations, they are facing each other. In essence, really, it's supposed to be around a table, because you are supposed to see everyone to be able to, as we have said, have that non-verbal communication being harvested. Other than states and international organizations, we also have the non-state actors, and these are renowned persons. And I guess we all know this great lady. Yes, the late. Yes. We also have many other actors he identified. Today we have any of these that can be able to perform those roles. We have the NGOs, we have business persons, we have educationists, we have just basically those that can be able to conduct the business. So that brings us to the styles of diplomacy, where as part of this, if we could look at the first one, we have looked at it, the negotiations, states visits, yeah, heads of states are diplomat number one. Yeah, he's the diplomat number one. And the thing with state visits compared to other forms of or styles of diplomacy is that they do a lot of what? Procedure cutting and cost cutting and everything. You can imagine if we are sending delegates, a whole 30, 20 people to China, and it's a back and forth process to negotiate 2 years, 3 years before they finally get an agreement. So that's done on what? On a taxpayer. So a president will just visit, come, discuss, and it becomes what? The way forward, isn't it? So, but you can imagine now, if your head of state is always making trips to your country, then, and you have an embassy there, so what is your role? Anyway, there is again that question. Gun and boats is where, this is military hardware that is given to states whenever they are in conflict situations, or to be able to balance power, like they try to do in Ukraine. They give a lot of that assistance, so it's the military assistance that is given. That is why it is gun and boat. Then there is the economic diplomacy, which we have dealt with, foreign direct investments, trade and commerce, bringing investors into your country. And the beauty today is that Kenya, as we stand today, it is one of the preferred investments, yeah, in the sub-Saharan region, surpassing South Africa. It's something really to maybe, yes, in the last year, yes, there was, when you look at the statistics last year, as a preferred destination for investments, but we need to do better to woo more investors than that. Then anything, you remember we talked about diplomacy being all that a state can do, eh? So we had a lot of the vaccine diplomacy in the COVID time and all those many things. So your side diplomacy again comes in here, that within a formal meeting we can have a side meeting. So we have come here for Ms. President, but if we have an issue, we can step aside during coffee and discuss our things. So when states meet for these international conferences, they do have side diplomacy just to discuss their own issues going, if they have any, or even reach out for their own further engagements. Because you know, in September, all heads of states will be in New York. What you can do, therefore, is to prepare. If I need to see President X, this is the opportunity. I know he will be there, and therefore, it's a good time to have a side diplomacy. Then yours now comes the behind the scenes. So states don't directly negotiate because, as we have said, negotiations have to be done formally. There is procedure, there is protocol, isn't it? It's formal. So we cannot therefore find states therefore engaging directly, but they have a lot of behind the scenes. So you reach out, somebody said the media, somebody said you look at the community, and you look at for renowned and respected men and women and reach out. And even for Kenya, before going into Somalia, we know the late Yusuf Haji did a lot of this side diplomacy, the behind the scenes, because of the kin factor. Yeah, so he's able to use his relatives there to be able to negotiate, Sasa, you Al-Shabaab, what you want, yeah? So there is a lot of the behind the scenes reaching, but we cannot see a government engaging directly with this, and that really helped for all we know. Then of course, when it comes to conflict management, we can do this either formally through institutions of governments or international organizations. That is a track 1, like what we had in the post-election violence, or we can have a track 2, 3. Track 2 is by non-state actors, and track 3 is by me and you. Citizens in this country reach out to each other in the war-torn, conflict-torn regions, in the Baringo, Turkana, northeastern part of Kenya. You know, citizens by themselves, they sit down without anybody telling them to discuss their own issues, and that is a track 3 kind of conflict management. So anything you will do, whether you are bringing science, whether you are bringing art, whether you are bringing sports, whether you are bringing whatever it is, you see, even in the context of COVID, we had the vaccine, we had the masks, so anything that a state will do to advance its interest will be a form of diplomacy. complicate and even bring in maybe mutations and such like, yeah, when we make maybe such drugs that are not of maybe what they think is quality. However, really we do have quality. We really do have what it takes. Yeah, it's only that at times there are those that control that realm. For CBC, coming again, change of the system, yes, when the donors, you know, when what development partners do, and it's part of now diplomacy, states ask, you know, that I have this need, can you help? So for them, many a times they may not get into the details of, oh, you know, why are you changing, why are you doing this? Because for them is about helping out. You have a need, we can help, we are ready to help. And you know, it's mutual. Diplomacy again is about, they will help here, but they also have to benefit somewhere else. So it has to, somewhere, even them, they benefit in the process. It's not just about one-sided. And that is one principle on which diplomacy rides on, that there has to be, it is mutual, and again, there is reciprocity, meaning that scratch my back, I scratch yours, isn't it? And that is why at times when you find Chinese, or sorry to mention, that whenever you find their employees behaving not so well, caning grown-up men and women, and we are baying for their, you know, and we are saying no, tomorrow we hear they have been taken back to China, and we are like, no, why? You know? But you see, tomorrow Kenyans will be in China and they'll be selling drugs, and they are caught, and their laws are very punitive. It's death sentence. That's your daughter, that's your son, that's your brother. You will want again them to allow Kenyans to come back, be tried in the country, isn't it? So that reciprocity is another principle on which diplomacy rides on. And just the same way, if you disrespect my ambassador tomorrow and humiliate him, I'll also do the same to you, isn't it? When they are coming and you're searching them and you're harassing them, you also harass, you know? So it's all about a lot of reciprocity that goes in the practice of diplomacy.